morning, everyone. First of all, I need to, my name is Keith Moskowitz. I'm an attorney in Boulder. I've been practicing with my own firm in Boulder since 1992. I specialize in bankruptcy and estate planning. First thing, I have to have a thank you to Jack, because until last week and his presentation on alcoholism, independence, and intervention, I thought you couldn't talk about bad things here. And so I was going to do a presentation on estate planning, which I do, but my real love is bankruptcy and bankruptcy law. And I never meant to do this. In 1986, I was looking for a job. I was in Spokane, Washington, and a friend of mine had just made partner at a law firm. They wouldn't give me a job. He hired me, put me in the library. And eventually the other 4 partners thought somebody hired me. And finally they realized that I was just working a contract, and they said, well, if you can, Jay says you're better than our last 2 associates. If you can do both of their jobs, you're hired. And I never wanted to do bankruptcy. That's how I started. And unlike a lot of attorneys, it's been a wonderful, wonderful career. I absolutely love it. To borrow a statement from Dan, it's something I'm passionate about. So let's talk about the untalkable. And really, it's a lot like Jack said. This could be an intervention for a friend, if you're a family or friends who are having some economic problems. The biggest mistake is not doing something soon. When people come to me on a Friday and their house is going to foreclosure the following Wednesday, it limits our options. Just as an historical perspective, a lot of people that you know file bankruptcy. This is just a small list. What's really interesting is statistically, based on the numbers, at least 3 people you know personally have filed bankruptcy, even if you didn't know it. For example, I don't know if you recognize any of these people. Everybody from Mick Fleetwood to Larry King to Walt Disney to Johnny Unitas.
You should have more pictures of Trump on there, right?
Yes.
Like 4 or 5 pictures of Trump, right?
Probably. So bankruptcy should not be looked at as a failure. Bankruptcy should be looked at as a speed bump in life and a tool. It's a tool to give your family and friends a fresh start.
Who's that smoking a joint with like a gun in his head?
I believe it's David Crosby, and I couldn't
David
resist.
Crosby? Yeah, it looked like it.
Couldn't resist.
So I'm only going to be talking about personal bankruptcy here. We could spend 6 months talking about business bankruptcy, even just the basics. The most important thing to remember from the start is bankruptcy is allowed under the law, and its purpose is to give a financial fresh start. Some key points. Bankruptcy is an important tool for people facing severe financial problems. In a crisis, a bankruptcy can stop debt collectors. It can stop a foreclosure, lawsuits and garnishments. And most importantly, it can help your family and friends. So what you need to remember is that bankruptcy is a court proceeding. A lot of people say, well, do I need an attorney? Well, you need a surgeon when you need surgery. It's something that you really can't do yourself. And in my case, with 29 years experience, that experience will help it be. And a line that I use now, it's going to look boring when you work with me. It's going to go easily. There are some ramifications. It will remain on a person's credit report for 10 years, and the individual creditors can list it on your credit reports for up to 7. However, most people recover very quickly. One of my standard questions I ask people, because they're obviously very nervous to come and see me, is I ask, how big is your mailbox? They look at me and go, mailbox? And I said, yeah, because I said, if it's small, it's a problem. Because within a week or 2 after filing a bankruptcy, every car dealer between Trinidad And Cheyenne, Wyoming is going to want to be your best friend and offer you credit, as well as other credit card companies. So, bankruptcy is a federal right. Interestingly, it's in the Constitution. So for individuals, there are two types of bankruptcy. There's a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13. A Chapter 7 is often known as a liquidating bankruptcy. However, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, 99.9% of my clients lose nothing or very little. The second type of bankruptcy is a Chapter 13. We avoid Chapter 13s except in the very specialized cases. If you have a foreclosure, you can save your house and cure your mortgage arrears and catch up on your mortgage over 3 to 5 years. If you have non-dischargeable taxes, you can pay them back without penalties or interest over 3 to 5 years. If you have excess equity in your property, your home, you can still file bankruptcy and do a Chapter 13 and pay a reduced amount. So, in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it discharges almost all of your debt. The exceptions are if you have a house. That, the collateral on the mortgage. You still, if you want to keep your house, you have to continue paying your mortgage. Car payments are the same. However, you're allowed to keep many if not all of your property. In 2005, the Congress reformed the bankruptcy code. I think many of you may remember the news reports that the world was coming to an end. We had people lined up around the block of the bankruptcy court in Denver, but it really didn't change anything. But it has some new requirements. One of the things that it changed is that you now have to do what's called a means test. It sounds very complicated, but it's very, very simple. If your income is below the median income of the county you live in, or the state you live in, you can file a Chapter 7. It's not that hard. It's about $43,000 for an individual, about $65,000 for a married couple. It goes up. And interestingly, it rewards people who have big houses and big car payments because we take that off the income. Even if you do not pass the means test, Chapter 13 is always an option. And something that we should all remember, because we work with businesses, a lot of us work with startups. If a person has high income, but over 50% of their debt is directly business related, which can include certain student loans, we can still file a Chapter 7 and avoid the means test. You have to take credit counseling. No, I was never a big fan of it, but actually my clients like it. You have to take an online course. It takes about an hour before we file the case, and then about an hour and a half after we file in order to get your discharge. Very inexpensive, less than $20 for most of the providers. The bankruptcy process. A person will come in, they'll spend probably 2 to 3 hours with me, and we'll complete the bankruptcy petition, schedules, and then it gets submitted to the court. Approximately 30 days after we file the case, what we need to do is go down to what's called a meeting of creditors. First thing is I can count on one hand how many times creditors actually have come. And that's with thousands and thousands and thousands of cases I've filed over the last 28 or 29 years. You'll meet with the trustee. The trustee is a private attorney in our jurisdiction, which is appointed by the U.S. Department of Justice to review the case. His job is to see if there are any assets that are called non-exempt, which means are available to your creditors. Most people are not going to have any non-exempt assets. Just for example, with a house, a couple can have up to $60,000 in equity in their house. The interesting thing is that if you're 59 years old, you wait a year, at 60 it goes up to 90. That's some of the things that I've advised clients if they have a lot of equity. Pre-bankruptcy planning is part of my job.
And what do they base equity on? Do they base it on the appraised value, or do they base it on the tax value?
Appraised value.
Appraised value.
100% of your 401ks or pensions, if it's ERISA qualified, it's exempt. You can have $1 million in pensions, and they'll be safe. And what I say is, we can spend a lot of time talking about exemptions, but if your friends or family have questions, just come and talk to me. It's something that I would be happy to discuss with them. So, let's move on to chapter 13. A couple of months ago, I got a call and the person was very emphatic. Do I know anything about chapter 13? And I think my answer, startled them. It says, yes, I know enough that I'm going to work very hard to keep you out of chapter 13. Chapter 13 is the classic, no good deed goes unpunished. As I mentioned before, you have to make payments over 3 to 5 years. The only reason to do it is that if you're exceptionally high income, and you don't qualify under the means test, and it's not a business case. If you owe taxes, it's a wonderful option, because if you're in a payment plan with the IRS, you're still paying penalties and interest that run between 15 and 20% a year. We can avoid all of that. If you're behind on your mortgage, we can save your house. We can also help somebody catch up on child support or maintenance obligations. So a couple key points. You can only file one chapter of bankruptcy at a time. There are cases where we will do what we call a Chapter 20, where a person may have a lot of tax debt, file a Chapter 7 to get them, so they'll be eligible for 13, then file a 13. The Chapter 7 offers a financial fresh start and is much quicker than a Chapter 7. I can have a client in and out of a Chapter 7 within 4 months, compared to 3 to 5 years in a Chapter 13. As I said, you are required to do some debtor education courses, which I think is a good idea. It helps my clients. Anything that helps my clients, I'm going to support. And you can only file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy every 8 years. Contrary to what you may hear, the serial files are very rare. There are very, very few people who use Chapter 7 bankruptcy as part of their financial planning.
Except for Trump.
Except for Donald Trump.
Yeah, he seems to do that.
A couple things bankruptcy will not remove. Child support and alimony. Debts for personal under your death caused under the influence of alcohol or drugs. One of the things I ask my clients, I said, will everything be discharged? So I always ask them, when was the last time you were in an auto accident while you were under the influence of alcohol or drugs? One of these days I'm going to get the wrong answer. Fines and penalties cannot be discharged. Student loans, interestingly, people don't realize we can discharge taxes. It takes a careful analysis, but basically if the tax is more than 3 years old and you timely filed your federal or state tax returns, come and see me. I can help. Criminal restitution. The bankruptcy code does not allow you to come and see me and go to Target and buy the big screen TV and go to the Bahamas and then file bankruptcy. So let's talk about the aftermath. People always ask me, what happens after I file bankruptcy? To cite despite my common advice, well, you no longer have to duck to the shadows when you're walking on the Pearl Street Mall. It really gives you a financial fresh start. People are not getting calls in the middle of the night about how to pay their debts. Debt collectors are not calling them during their day or calling their employers. You'll reestablish credit very, very quickly, which surprises a lot of people. And as you know, we can also get a mortgage about 2.5 years after discharge from bankruptcy.
Chapter 13, 2 years payment history. For most Chapter 7s, it's 4 years.
Is it 4 years now?
Yeah, for most Chapter 7s.
Okay.
But Jim, you have a way around that too, don't you?
I might.
Yeah.
There are ways around it. There definitely are ways around it. We have been able to.
Yeah.
Clients have done it
That's
in
the
2 years.
standard agency requirement.
Okay. Some negative things that might happen. You're not going to buy a Dodge Durango at 0% interest over 60 years. You're going to pay a little bit more in interest for a while. And a real negative is that employers may look at it. Now, you're protected at your present job under federal law. They cannot discriminate against you. That's not true when you go to apply for a new job. It could be on your credit report. And in 29 years, I've had one client call and say, my landlord doesn't want to rent to me because I filed bankruptcy. What I really find is most landlords don't look at it as a negative, but a positive, because they know you can pay the rent because you don't have other debts.
I think they run it for life insurance too, don't they, Steve?
No, driving records.
Driver's records.
So, just sort of wrapping up, you know, what can bankruptcy do for a friend or a family? Financial freedom. Thank you.
That was great, thanks.